guys, it's Lara. Thank you all for watching and welcome back to my channel. Tea with Lara is back, which means story time and chatty videos, and today we're gonna be spilling it. I'm gonna be telling you about the creepiest boss I've worked for, so if that's something you're interested in, then please keep watching. Years ago, I applied for a job in a marketing company that shall remain unnamed. My job interview was with a guy who then ended up being my boss, and already during the job interview he kept asking very personal questions, and some questions were even questions that are actually by law off limits for a job interview. The thing is, in Austria there are very strong laws that protect workers and there are certain rules for job interviews. I'm actually nowadays making job interviews in our company myself, and there are questions that I would never ever ask. Basically, mainly for ethical reasons, and also because some of the questions might put a potential worker in a really awkward situation. So it's, for example, questions about your sexual orientation or about whether you're planning motherhood or not. And he asked some of these questions that I did not find 100% correct. I did understand kind of the question about planning motherhood, because he explained to me that he understands that that's a very personal question, but he told me that since everyone who would start working in the company would need a certain time to learn all the skills and to understand the information systems they were working with, he didn't invest time into someone who was gonna leave then soon on maternity leave. So I kind of understood and I shook it off. But then he started asking many questions about my language skills. So I'm not German native speaker. I was born and raised in the Czech Republic, and he was concerned that my knowledge of the German language, even though I speak fluently with minimum accent, he was concerned that my email correspondence might reflect poorly on the company if I were to make mistakes. He was very strict about grammar and about writing, and I told him right away, look, I'm not a native speaker, so of course I can never guarantee that I would never make a mistake, but I can only tell you that I'm always gonna do my best. I'm even studying at a university here, so obviously my knowledge of the language is pretty good. And you hear how I'm talking, and I'm using all the tools that are out there. So I promised him to do my best, but I never promised that I can't ever make a mistake, because you can't ever know, right? If you're not a native speaker, and even native speakers make mistakes. So that was a big deal, but apparently I answered to his liking, because I think like 1 or 2 days later I got a call that I was hired. So shortly after I started working in the company, I started noticing that the company was very old-fashioned. They had a very vertical hierarchy, and in some divisions it seemed as though there were as many bosses as employees, and it was not any exception in the division where I was working. So we were in total 4 people, me, another lady who was shortly before her retirement. She only had a few more years to work, and then there was another guy who was kind of a supervisor, and then the boss. So the guy who was the kind of supervisor, he was very nice. He taught me a lot, and I was working with him at the beginning on a pretty big project, because when I started, the boss was in the company only for like 3 days, and then he went on a vacation. So the supervisor started teaching me everything about the information system, and he started showing me how things worked and how the filing system worked, because that was something the boss was very strict about, which I understood. And actually at the end of the day, it made me, even in my personal life, so much more organized. So I was really happy about that experience. So I worked mainly with the supervisor at the beginning, and he taught me a lot, and he had me working on a large project. And after about a week, he basically left me doing the job on my own, because he was very happy with the result, and he only checked certain things before we sent things out. And that was very encouraging. The lady who was working there too, she was very skeptical at the beginning, which I later understood. She kind of kept her distance, and I could tell that she was really just waiting how am I going to turn out? We were not even on first name basis for the first like 3 weeks, but later she started thawing, and then she explained to me why she was the way she was. I'm gonna go into that a little bit later. So yeah, I kept working and I enjoyed my job, and then the boss came back from vacation, and that's when things started to change. While the supervisor trusted me and was really happy with my performance and with how much I learned in the shortest period of time, this boss was pretty much paranoid about anything anyone else was doing. It wasn't just me, it was everybody else. And when I started then working with him on his group of customers, he wanted to check every single bit, even the tiniest thing. It was basically micromanagement at its finest. And I was not allowed to send anything out to anyone, not even within the company, unless he has read everything and looked at everything. And I ended up sitting every day, the entire morning, with nothing to do, because he would come to work around noon, and then he would have me stay at least 1 or 2 hours overtime pretty much every day, or like every other day. And even though I got the time paid, and I earned a little bit more thanks to that, that was not what I was looking for. It was really difficult for me because I was still going to the university, so I basically had no time to learn. I was coming home super late, super tired. And another thing that bothered me was that whenever I would stay overtime, he would always sit next to me for like when everybody left, and was like overviewing my work, but he would always sit very close to me, and one time even his leg touched mine, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. So I kind of started like moving my body a little bit further from him, and I'm pretty sure he noticed, and I guess that made him angry, because then he started nagging on me a lot for every single thing. And one thing he loved nagging on was the way I spoke and wrote. And he always made me feel really bad about myself, and he was always criticizing my German, even though everybody else said, there is nothing wrong with the way you're writing, there is nothing wrong with your German, it's perfectly fine. It's just him finding excuses to kind of bully you. And the thing is, when people start criticizing certain things about you, when they do it on a regular basis, you start being very self-conscious about that, even though you might not even have a reason for that. And that's how I felt after a while. I started being super anxious whenever I was writing something. And fortunately, the supervisor and the lady who were working in the same department were very nice, and they often checked my stuff to assure me that I did not do anything wrong. So at least that when he would be yelling at me, that I knew, okay, it's just him acting out. In addition to his constant nagging on my German, to him having me sit for hours every morning with nothing to do because he was so paranoid about my work, even though I also parallelly worked occasionally with the supervisor for his customers, and everybody loved my work. And in addition to the fact that he would always try to sit so incredibly close to me, which creeped me out, he was very mean to the other lady that was working in the division. And he would even make her cry very often for no reason. He would literally take his anger out on her. And I think he abused the fact that she was so shortly before her retirement, and that she knew that if she would lose that job, that it would be really difficult to find another job. And he verbally abused her. He was really mean to her. He always made her feel worthless. He wouldn't let her go on vacation for a very long time, even though that was actually not okay. And I think the worst thing was that I was actually allowed to go on vacation, even though I was working at the company only for a short period of time, while she was not allowed to go. And that hurt her so much. But she was not mad at me for that, and she even started opening to me about the things that were going on at the company. And she told me that I actually replaced a lady who used to work in the division because she had a mental breakdown. And she explained to me that the lady was also having an affair with the boss, and supposedly she was pregnant, and then he was pushing her into an abortion because he was married and the lady had a mental breakdown, and that's why he was looking for a replacement. And then I came and I was actually a similar type. So when I started working at the company, the lady was afraid that I'm gonna be another mistress, but very shortly after I started working, she realized I was a completely different person. A, I was not interested in the boss. B, I was very nice. And C, she really liked me as a person, and she understood that that was not gonna happen with me. She even noticed that I was creeped out by the boss, so that was a huge relief for her. And that's when she started actually warming up towards me, and we ended up having a wonderful relationship. But I understood her concerns after she told me what actually happened before I started working at the company. It was definitely understandable that she was worried, because as I started working there, he would be occasionally making comments about my appearance, which made me feel very uncomfortable. He would be giving me compliments in front of other people. That was really creepy. So anyway, after hearing that disturbing story, I thought, you know, maybe this is not the right place for me. And fortunately, I knew that I could afford to quit, which is something not all people around the world can do. Very often people are working for huge creeps, but they can't afford to quit their jobs, so they have to stay there, and that's very disturbing. And my heart definitely goes out to anyone who's dealing with something like that. But I was in a very lucky position, so I knew, okay, either I'm gonna quit completely, or he's gonna let me work part-time, and then we'll see how things are gonna work out long term. So I went to his office, and I explained to him that that was not an option for me to just sit there in the morning with nothing to do, that it was really difficult for me to catch up on my studies, and that my education was still very important to me. And I told him that I would be willing to work part-time, because that way that would be a great compromise. We could still work together on projects, and I would not mind to stay an hour longer occasionally if I had at least a morning for myself. And at the end of the day, it would be even cheaper for the company, because part-time workers are so much less expensive because the taxes are so much lower. And many companies throughout the country actually opt very often rather for part-time workers, exactly for that reason. But of course, him being a control freak, he told me right away that's not gonna happen. Part-time is not an option. That's not how the company was doing things. They were always hiring only full-time workers. So I told him, okay, I'm really sorry, but in that case, I would like to quit. And he started panicking, and he started telling me that he had no one else, and that if I would quit and use the legal period of notice, which was only a month, that would be really bad for the company, and he begged me to stay a little bit longer. I was actually just about to go on my vacation, so he asked me to at least think about it over my vacation, and that we could sit together after I came back and see what we can do so that everyone was happy. And I promised I would think about it, but I never promised that I'm gonna stay longer. So I was on my vacation, and I thought, okay, maybe he will at least now give me some space to think about it, but I was wrong. He started bullying me with phone calls, and he was phoning because of every little thing that anyone else could handle or answer. It was kind of a power play, probably a little punishment for me telling him that I was gonna leave, and probably also guilt tripping. And one time he called about something so stupid that I felt like, okay, I'm not gonna have any of this. I'm gonna make this official now that I'm quitting. So I would not return his phone calls anymore. And I wrote to him that I was gonna quit, and that I would use only the period of notice that was stipulated in my contract, and then that I was gone. And when I came back from vacation, everyone was mad at me. And I didn't understand why. Later I understood he was a master manipulator, and he started telling people that we actually had an official agreement, that I agreed to stay longer. He did not say that actually we only agreed that I would think about it, and that now he can't let the colleague go on vacation because he can't trust me enough to work. He has to send me home right away and whatnot. So he was spreading lies basically, but fortunately the people were smart enough to listen also to my side of the story, and they very quickly understood that he was just basically manipulating them, and that made them even more mad about him. And yeah, so he basically, you know, shot himself in the knee with telling these lies. And people from the other divisions started coming to me, and they told me that they were actually happy that finally someone in the guys division quit on their own, because he was master of firing people, like breaking them first and then firing them, and that it must have hurt his ego so much that one person actually decides their own fate. So that was kind of interesting. Also, I forgot to mention that when I came back from vacation, he would not speak to me for about a week because he was so offended, and he acted as though me handing in notice was the worst thing a person could do. And when he finally spoke to me, that was when he threw all the shade on me and tried to make me feel guilty. So anyway, when he finally spoke to me and when we had our first talk, he then said that graciously he would give me a chance to work, because I told him like, hey, why can't my colleague go on vacation? Like, let's not take your anger out on her. It's not about that. Like, I'm perfectly happy to work till the last day. But he was very adamant that he will punish her and that it was my fault, so which made no sense. So at some point, when I noticed that he was even meaner to her after all this happened with me, I decided to speak up about that, and I scheduled an appointment with the managers of the company, and I told them basically about the entire situation, how things were going in the division, and that I even offered working part-time and that he would decline it, and didn't even have a reason except for that the company was always hiring full-time people. And one of the bosses was very concerned with everything I said. The other boss was kind of on his side and tried to guilt trip me that I was basically backstabbing him. I told him that there was nothing backstabbing about actually standing up for another person who's been in a really bad position, my colleague, who was not allowed to go on a vacation at that point for over a year, and she was exhausted and she definitely deserved her vacation time. So long story short, apparently they talked to him. He was again very offended that I talked with them behind his back. I told him to suck it up, and I started, I wouldn't say being rude, but I basically called him out on things when he would tell things to me. Even in front of other people, I told him that his shit was not working on me anymore, and he started being even nicer to the colleague. So apparently they talked about that. She was allowed to go on her vacation, and I was working only for another month. And then I left the company. I still kept contact with a few of the people. I think I'm still friends with some of them on Facebook. They were super nice. Again, I loved the job there. It was not about the company. It was just about this person who was a freak. And I think like a year later or something like that, things even started changing from what I've heard in the company. They flattened the hierarchy. This guy left the company. I think they made him leave, but because he was working there a long time, he had some really great settlement. So it wasn't a bad thing for him when he left, but he was gone. And they kind of melted certain departments, and yeah, things started improving there from what I've heard. And my colleague stayed there, the lady who was shortly before her retirement, even though he had to leave the company. That was kind of a big satisfaction for me because I was very happy for her. At the end of the day, it was still a very interesting experience, not necessarily with him, but working at the company. I learned new skills, I met some amazing people, and at the end of the day, I took the best of it for myself. I even became way more organized, especially because he was so strict about the filing system. So that was a great thing. And yeah, just like with anything in life, we sometimes go through things, but that's how we grow. I sure hope that you guys enjoyed our chatty video today. If you enjoy videos like that, I will link here in the right corner a playlist with similar videos so you can entertain yourself for quite a while. Thank you all so much for watching. God bless you guys. I love you so much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you with my next video. Bye.